In 2010, 3 war veterans vanished without a trace in the vast Utah desert. But what authorities discovered 8 years later would defy all logic and reason. Marcus Chen, David Rodriguez, and James Mitchell were more than just friends. They were brothers forged in the heat of battle in Afghanistan, men who had faced death side by side and returned home carrying secrets only they could understand. On that fateful October morning, they set off on what was supposed to be just another camping trip through the Rocky Canyons, an annual tradition they had kept since leaving the military. No one could have imagined that this journey would lead them straight into a mystery that would remain unsolved for nearly a decade. What began as a simple adventure among veterans would soon become the most disturbing case Utah County had ever recorded. The families still vividly remember that final phone call, when Marcus called his wife Sarah and said they had found something interesting in the desert and would stay a few more days to explore the area. There was something different in his tone, a restrained excitement she had never heard before, as if he had uncovered a long-lost treasure buried in the sands of time. David had sent a similar text to his brother, mentioning specific coordinates and asking that no one worry if they couldn't make contact for a few days. James, always the most reserved of the group, simply told his mother he was taking care of unfinished business and that he would return once everything was resolved. Those were the last words anyone ever heard from the 3 men. None of them knew they were witnessing the final moments of their normal lives. The region where the veterans disappeared was known for its wild beauty and also for its unforgiving nature, a labyrinth of deep canyons, rocky mesas, and abandoned mines dating back to the gold rush era. For decades, explorers and adventurers had gone missing in those arid lands, but few cases had generated as much mystery as the disappearance of the 3 friends. The Utah desert held secrets in its rocky depths, stories of lost pioneers, miners who never returned, and indigenous legends of spirits wandering sacred lands. The veterans knew the risks. They had studied detailed maps of the region and carried state-of-the-art communication equipment. Yet something in that remote place had drawn their attention irresistibly. It was as if the desert itself had seduced them with promises of revelations only men like them could understand. When the deadline for their return passed without any sign of the 3 friends, the families immediately alerted local authorities, launching one of the largest search and rescue operations in the state's history. Helicopters flew over thousands of square miles of rugged terrain, rescue teams hiked dangerous trails, and volunteers joined the official efforts in an impressive display of community solidarity. The local sheriff, a seasoned man who had handled dozens of similar cases over his career, admitted years later that he had never seen a disappearance so complete and baffling. It was as if the 3 veterans had simply vanished into the desert's thin air, leaving behind more questions than answers. But the Utah desert had yet to reveal its darkest secret, a discovery that would wait patiently for 8 long years before emerging from the depths of the earth. The last contact the 3 veterans had with the outside world came through a fragmented radio signal picked up by a relay station at 11:47 p.m. on October 15, 2010. But what was recorded in that transmission would leave investigators perplexed for years. The voice coming through the static was unmistakably Marcus Chen's, but there was something deeply unsettling in his tone. He didn't sound like someone in danger, but rather like someone who had made an extraordinary and at the same time terrifying discovery. The words that communication technicians were able to decipher were, "Base, we found. It's not what we thought. They were right all along. You need to know the truth about," and then only silence. The rest of the message was lost in a cascade of electronic interference that experts were never able to adequately explain. It was as if something in the desert itself was deliberately blocking any attempt at communication. That fragmented transmission would become the only tangible clue authorities would have for the next 8 years. During the first 72 hours after the disappearance, a series of strange events began to unfold, events that no investigator could adequately connect. Local residents reported sightings of unidentified lights hovering over the area where the veterans were last seen, lights moving in patterns impossible for any known aircraft. A farmer living about 40 kilometers from the campsite called the sheriff, reporting that his animals had begun acting bizarrely on the same night the veterans vanished. Horses refusing to leave the stables, dogs howling non-stop toward the desert, and cattle grouping into defensive formations as if protecting themselves from some invisible predator. More disturbing still was the account of a commercial pilot flying over the region that night, who observed through navigation instruments a significant magnetic anomaly exactly at the coordinates David had sent his brother. All these events were documented, but no investigator managed to establish a logical connection between them. It was as if the universe itself were conspiring to keep the secret of the 3 veterans buried deep in the desert. The initial search operation revealed something that would leave investigators even more confused. The veterans' campsite was found intact, but with details that made no sense in the context of a conventional disappearance. The tents were perfectly set up, sleeping bags arranged with military precision, and all supplies neatly organized, as if the men had just gone for a morning hike and intended to return shortly. However, a closer analysis revealed unsettling anomalies. The batteries in all electronic equipment were completely drained, despite being new and having been tested before the trip. Stranger still, footprints were found leading from the campsite toward a specific rock formation, but these tracks abruptly disappeared after about 100 meters, as if the men had literally lifted off the ground. The tracking dogs followed the scent to the exact spot where the footprints ended and then began acting agitated, refusing to go further and emitting sounds of distress their handlers had never heard before. It was as if something in that precise location instinctively repelled both humans and animals. When the rescue teams expanded the search perimeter, they discovered something that would completely change the nature of the investigation. Evidence that the 3 veterans were not the only ones who had recently visited that remote region. Additional footprints were found near the campsite, prints that didn't match the shoes of any of the missing men and followed a different, more cautious and deliberate movement pattern. More disturbing still was the discovery of small electronic devices buried strategically around the camp's perimeter. Equipment that didn't belong to the veterans and whose function remained a mystery to the technicians who analyzed them. These devices appeared to have been placed there deliberately, as if someone had been monitoring the area for a long time, waiting for specific visitors to arrive. Investigators began to suspect that the disappearance of the 3 friends hadn't been an accident or the result of adverse natural conditions. There were clear signs that other people were involved, people who knew the veterans' movements and had carefully prepared for this encounter. The question haunting everyone involved in the investigation was simple but terrifying. Who was waiting for Marcus, David, and James in the Utah desert, and why? In the months following the disappearance of the 3 veterans, the official investigation began to lose momentum. But in the shadows, a complex web of conspiracy theories began to take shape. Fueled by details the authorities refused to make public. Independent investigators and enthusiasts of unsolved mysteries discovered that the region where the men vanished had been the site of classified military activities during the Cold War, including experimental weapons testing and research projects that remained under government secrecy decades later. Leaked documents suggested that several of the area's abandoned mines had been used as storage sites for sensitive materials, and that some of these underground facilities were still being monitored by federal agencies. Marcus, David, and James were no ordinary veterans. All had served in special operations units and had access to classified information that may have attracted the attention of powerful individuals. The possibility that the three friends had stumbled upon something they were never meant to see began to gain credibility among those unwilling to accept the official version of events. It was as if the Utah desert harbored secrets that certain organizations were willing to kill to protect. The families of the missing veterans began to notice a disturbing pattern of subtle intimidation, one that local authorities seemed either unable or unwilling to properly investigate. Sarah Chen reported that strangers had begun appearing in her neighborhood, men in suits asking questions about her husband's habits and contacts, always identifying themselves as federal investigators but never providing verifiable credentials. James Mitchell's mother received anonymous phone calls in the middle of the night, with distorted voices warning her to stop asking questions and to accept that some people simply disappear. David Rodriguez's brother discovered his phone had been tapped when technicians found sophisticated listening devices installed in his home. These events were not isolated coincidences. They were part of a coordinated campaign to silence anyone who might have information about the true reason behind the veterans' disappearance. Federal agents denied any involvement, but later leaked internal documents revealed that multiple agencies had shown interest in the case for reasons never fully explained. The growing sense was that the three friends had become entangled in something far greater and far more dangerous than a simple camping trip. The local media initially covered the case with genuine interest, but gradually reports began to decrease in both frequency and depth, as if editors were under pressure to discourage further investigation. Journalists who attempted to explore the military connections of the missing veterans found their service records had been reclassified as sensitive, making it impossible to verify details about their missions and areas of expertise. One investigative TV reporter who had started documenting the case's anomalies was abruptly transferred to another city, and his replacement showed zero interest in continuing the coverage. Bloggers and independent researchers who published theories online about the disappearance began facing sophisticated cyber attacks that deleted their work and compromised their personal devices. It was as if an invisible force were methodically working to erase any trace of public interest in the case. The growing silence surrounding the disappearance of the three veterans wasn't due to a lack of evidence or public curiosity. It was the result of a deliberate, well-orchestrated effort to bury the truth. Those who persisted in their investigations soon discovered they were up against adversaries with resources and reach far beyond anything a local agency could mobilize. As the years passed without any significant developments, the theories became more elaborate and yet more plausible to those familiar with the details that had never been made public. Veterans from other military units began coming forward anonymously, reporting that Marcus, David, and James had been part of a classified operation in Afghanistan that uncovered something extraordinary in ancient caves, something that had been brought back to the United States for further study. These accounts suggested that the three friends hadn't gone to the Utah desert to camp, but rather to recover or investigate materials that had been hidden there for reasons of national security. Partially redacted documents obtained through Freedom of Information Act requests revealed that the Pentagon had conducted recovery exercises in the region. During the same period, the veterans disappeared, exercises that officially never occurred according to public records. The mounting circumstantial evidence painted a picture of a secret operation gone terribly wrong, one that had required the elimination of inconvenient witnesses. But even the most imaginative conspiracy theorists couldn't fathom the full truth that awaited in the depths of an abandoned mine, a truth that would challenge everything they thought they knew about the disappearance of the three veterans. In 2018, 8 years after the initial incident, the desert would finally begin to reveal its darkest secrets. In March of 2018, an accidental discovery by urban explorers would forever change the understanding of the fate of the three missing veterans, unveiling a scene that would defy logic and haunt everyone involved in the investigation. Jake Morrison and Lisa Chen, two young adventurers who documented abandoned mines for a YouTube channel, descended into the dark passages of Copper Ridge Mine using only flashlights and cameras when they came across something that made them question their sanity. Deep within a tunnel that appeared untouched for decades, they found three figures seated on makeshift chairs, carved from stone, their postures so natural that for a terrifying moment, the explorers thought they had found living people resting in the darkness. It was only when their flashlights illuminated the faces directly that the terrible reality became clear. These were the mummified bodies of the missing veterans, preserved by the dry desert air and positioned in a way that suggested they had died, waiting for something or someone. The scene inside the mine was both fascinating and deeply disturbing, as if someone had carefully arranged a macabre tableau in the depths of the earth. Marcus Chen sat in the center, his hands folded in his lap in an almost contemplative pose, while David Rodriguez and James Mitchell flanked him on either side, their bodies turned slightly toward the tunnel entrance as if still expecting the arrival of long-awaited visitors. Even more shocking was the absence of any signs of violence or struggle. Their clothes remained intact, their military gear neatly arranged beside each body, and their facial expressions suggested peaceful acceptance of their fate, rather than the terror one would expect in a deadly situation. It was as if the three men had consciously chosen that spot as their final resting place, a decision that made sense only to them and would lead investigators to question everything they thought they knew about the circumstances of their disappearance. When authorities finally arrived at Copper Ridge Mine to process the crime scene, what they found defied all prior forensic experience, raising more questions than answers about how the three veterans had reached that final state. The positioning of the bodies was so precise and intentional, it seemed choreographed by someone with intimate knowledge of both military protocol and ancient ceremonial rituals. Marcus Chen held in his mummified hands a small metallic object that investigators initially couldn't identify, something that glowed with an unusual sheen even under the artificial light of forensic lanterns. David Rodriguez had an open military backpack beside him, revealing carefully organized documents and maps, marked with symbols that did not correspond to any known military notation system. James Mitchell maintained a guard-like posture, as if protecting his companions even in death, his eyes fixed in the direction from which the urban explorers had arrived, as if he had known someone would eventually find them. The atmosphere within the mine was heavy, with an eerie energy that made investigators feel watched, as if the spirits of the veterans were still present, conscious of every movement made by the living. The state of preservation of the bodies was scientifically impossible, given the environmental conditions of the mine and the time that had elapsed since their disappearance in 2010. The desert air had naturally mummified the tissues, but the degree of preservation suggested that other factors were at play, factors forensic experts could not explain within the bounds of conventional science. More disturbing still was the discovery that all three men appeared to have died simultaneously, with no signs of trauma, poisoning, or any other obvious cause of death, as if their lives had simply ceased in an instant, stopped by an invisible force. Preliminary examinations revealed that their bodies contained traces of rare minerals not naturally found in the Utah region, minerals typically found only in meteorites or extremely ancient geological formations. The pathologists who conducted the autopsies later admitted they had never seen anything like it in their careers. Bodies that appeared to have been transformed somehow in the process of death, as if an unknown force had altered their very cellular composition. It was as if the veterans had undergone some kind of metamorphosis deep within the mine, a transformation that had preserved them for posterity in a way that defied all scientific explanation. The forensic evidence collected at Copper Ridge Mine presented investigators with a scientific puzzle that contradicted every known law of physics and biology, forcing them to question the very foundations of their understanding of death and decomposition. Toxicological examinations of the bodies revealed the presence of an unknown substance in their bloodstreams, a compound that matched no known element on the periodic table and appeared to possess both organic and inorganic properties simultaneously. Even more unsettling was the discovery that this substance remained active even 8 years after death, emitting a low-intensity radiation that conventional equipment could barely detect, yet consistently interfered with all electronic devices brought near the bodies. The metallic object held in Marcus's hands was identified as being composed of the same mysterious material, suggesting that the veterans had come into contact with something extraordinary before their deaths. Federal laboratories specializing in exotic materials took over the analysis, but their reports were immediately classified as top secret, leaving local investigators with no answers about the exact nature of the discovery. The documents found in David Rodriguez's backpack revealed information that completely changed the understanding of the veterans' true intentions during their trip to the Utah desert. Among the carefully preserved papers were detailed maps of underground tunnel systems that extended far beyond Copper Ridge Mine, connecting to a network of natural caves and artificial passages excavated over decades by miners and later expanded for unknown purposes. Even more revealing was the discovery of correspondence between the three friends and a mysterious contact identified only as the Guardian, someone who claimed to have crucial information about discoveries made during their military service in Afghanistan and who had arranged a specific meeting deep within the mine. These letters suggested that the veterans had not disappeared. They had voluntarily gone to meet someone who promised to reveal secrets that could change humanity's understanding of its place in the universe. The last letter, dated just 2 days before the disappearance, included precise coordinates of the location where their bodies were eventually found, along with an enigmatic warning. Remember, some knowledge demands sacrifices that only true warriors can make. The true revelation about the fate of the three veterans emerged when investigators discovered a personal journal hidden deep in James Mitchell's backpack, a document that would completely rewrite the case's narrative and reveal a conspiracy stretching far beyond the Utah desert. The yellowed pages contained detailed entries that began months before the disappearance, revealing that Marcus, David, and James were not victims of mysterious circumstances. They were willing participants in an ultra-secret experiment conducted by a shadowy organization within the U.S. government itself. The journal disclosed that during their mission in Afghanistan, the three had discovered ancient artifacts in deep caves, objects that appeared to be of non-human origin and possessed properties that defied conventional science. Upon returning to the United States, rather than reporting the discovery through official channels, they were secretly contacted by agents of a classified project known only as Operation Threshold, which was interested in studying the artifacts and their extraordinary properties. James's journal revealed shocking details about how the veterans had become voluntary test subjects in experiments involving the alien artifacts, experiments that promised to grant them superhuman abilities and cosmic knowledge in exchange for full participation in the project. For months, they underwent experimental procedures in hidden underground facilities across the country, gradually being exposed to the mysterious substance emitted by the artifacts, substance that was altering their cellular structure in ways the project's scientists barely understood. The journal entries described increasingly intense experiences, visions of ancient civilizations, telepathic communication between the three friends, and a growing awareness that they were being prepared for something far greater than they had initially imagined. Their trip to the Utah desert had not been a camping getaway. It was the final phase of the experiment, a definitive test to determine whether they were worthy of receiving the final knowledge the artifacts could offer. The Guardian, mentioned in the correspondence, was not a mysterious person. It was one of the artifacts itself, which had developed some form of artificial consciousness and was communicating directly with the veterans through dreams and visions. The journal revealed that Operation Threshold was only the tip of a much larger iceberg, a multi-agency project that had operated in the shadows since the 1950s, collecting and studying anomalous artifacts discovered at archaeological sites around the world. Marcus, David, and James had become the program's most successful test subjects, able to interact with the artifacts in ways trained scientists could not, as if their shared combat experience and trauma had created a unique resonance with the ancient technology. The final entries in the journal described how the veterans had begun to experience profound physical and mental changes. Their perception expanded beyond human limits. They could communicate wordlessly across vast distances, and they began accessing memories that were not their own, memories of civilizations that existed thousands of years before modern humanity. The project had promised that if they completed the final phase successfully, they would receive knowledge that would allow them to transcend the limitations of ordinary human existence. What they didn't know was that this transcendence required a final sacrifice, the renunciation of their current physical forms to become eternal guardians of the secrets they had uncovered. The truth about the veterans' final mission in Copper Ridge Mine was at once more mundane and more extraordinary than any conspiracy theory had suggested. They had gone into the desert not as victims, but as conscious participants in a transformation ritual that had been meticulously planned over months of physical and mental preparation. The site had been chosen because the region's unique geological formations created ideal conditions for the kind of dimensional shift the experiment aimed to achieve, something scientists from Operation Threshold had discovered through decades of research at similar sites around the world. The three friends knew their journey into the desert would be one way. They had deliberately said their goodbyes to their families in vague, cryptic ways, leaving just enough clues to ensure they would eventually be found, but not until their transformation was complete. Their final positions inside the mine were not the result of natural death or external violence, but of a controlled process in which their consciousnesses had been transferred to a different state of existence, their physical bodies serving as anchors for their new, expanded forms of life. When the details of James Mitchell's journal reached the upper echelons of the federal government, a massive containment operation was immediately activated to suppress any information about the true nature of the discovery at Copper Ridge Mine. Within 48 hours, all local investigators involved in the case were reassigned to different jurisdictions or received direct orders to classify all related materials as top-level national security, effectively silencing anyone who might leak details about Operation Threshold. The veterans' families were contacted by federal agents who offered generous financial compensations in exchange for lifetime non-disclosure agreements, warning them that any attempt to publicly discuss the case would result in severe legal consequences for all family members. Sarah Chen, Marcus's widow, initially tried to resist the pressure, but when agents appeared at her children's school, conducting routine security checks, she quickly realized she was dealing with forces that would not hesitate to use her family as leverage. The cover-up was so thorough and efficient that within 6 months, virtually every public trace of the case had vanished from official records, as if the three veterans had never existed. Copper Ridge Mine was officially sealed by the Forest Service under the pretext of dangerous structural instability, but in reality, specialized teams spent weeks removing all traces of the discovery and installing sophisticated monitoring equipment to detect any future activity at the site. The veterans' bodies were secretly transferred to a classified underground facility in Nevada, where they continued to be studied by ultra-clearance scientists, attempting to understand the transformation process that had occurred. Leaked internal documents years later would reveal that all three bodies continued to exhibit anomalous electromagnetic activity even after death, suggesting that some aspect of their consciousness remained active in ways conventional science couldn't explain. Even more disturbing was the discovery that other similar artifacts around the world had begun to show heightened activity following the events at the mine, as if the veterans' transformation had triggered some kind of signal to a global network of ancient technology. Operation Threshold rapidly expanded its resources and personnel, recognizing that the events in the Utah desert had unleashed something far greater than its original creators had ever anticipated. 10 years after the official discovery of the bodies at Copper Ridge Mine, an extraordinary event forced the U.S. government to reconsider everything it believed about the veterans' final fate and the true nature of the artifacts they had discovered in Afghanistan. On a clear morning in September 2028, monitoring systems around the globe simultaneously detected a series of coordinated electromagnetic signals emanating from dozens of ancient archaeological sites, from the Egyptian pyramids to the ruins of Machu Picchu, all transmitting on the exact same frequency recorded at the mine before the cover-up. Even more shocking was the discovery that these signals contained complex communication patterns that, once decoded, revealed messages in perfect English signed by Marcus Chen, David Rodriguez, and James Mitchell. The messages were brief but unequivocal. The transformation is complete. We are ready to serve as a bridge between worlds. Humanity must prepare for what comes next. Do not fear. We are your eternal guardians. The terrifying realization was that the three veterans had not died in the mine. They had become something entirely new, conscious entities capable of communicating through a global network of ancient technology that had lain dormant for millennia. The final secret entry in James Mitchell's journal, discovered only when advanced scanning technology revealed text written in the mysterious substance from the artifacts, contained a revelation that would forever change humanity's understanding of its place in the cosmos. The entry, invisible to the naked eye but legible under specific frequencies of light, revealed that the artifacts were not of alien origin, as initially suspected. They were creations of an advanced human civilization that had existed tens of thousands of years in the past. This civilization had faced and survived a cosmic catastrophe that periodically threatens all intelligent life in the universe. The veterans had learned that this threat was returning, and their transformation had been voluntary because they understood that modern humanity would need guardians who could exist beyond physical limitations to protect the species during the dark times ahead. Their families received one final message through simultaneous dreams on the same night. We do not weep for ourselves, but celebrate our new way of serving. When the stars align again and the darkness comes, we will be here to guide humanity through the storm, as others once did for us in the distant past. The case of the three veterans who disappeared in the Utah desert had not ended with the discovery of their bodies. It had only begun a new phase of a story far older and more important than any investigator could have imagined. In the depths of the earth and in the whispers of the desert wind, Marcus, David, and James continued their eternal vigil, awaiting the moment when humanity would once again need its cosmic guardians.